How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, the sequel to the original Wes Craven classic. Last week, I think, on this channel, I talked about the original Hills Have Eyes, and, you know, I really do like this series. There's 2 of the original, 2 of the remake, and I figured, you know, I think I'll go through and watch the whole thing and do reviews for all of them. So hopefully on the next couple weeks, I can round out all 4 films. So we're here for Part 2 from 1985. Once again, we're directed by horror legend Wes Craven, and we star Michael Berryman back as Pluto, Kevin Blair, John Bloom as the new villain Reaper, and of course, Janus Blythe as Ruby. In this movie, it's 8 years later after the first movie. Ruby is integrating pretty well into society. She's with Bobby, and Bobby has developed a new kind of fuel that could make him millions, but the race that they want to demo the fuel at is in the middle of the desert, and Bobby doesn't want to go back into the hills. So, Ruby offers to take the team herself to, so the racers and the equipment techs, they all get in a van, and they go through the desert trying to get to this race. Of course, they're late, and they take a shortcut, and a big rock gashes the tank on the engine, and all their fuel spills out, except for just a little bit. So they're running on fumes. They can't use the special fuel or it'll just blow up the bus. But they do find a mine, which would look to be abandoned, but there is signs that someone's been living here. When they explore, Ruby runs into her brother Pluto, who she thought was dead, and it turns out more of her family is out there. There's another new family member, Reaper, and yeah, I don't know why he was never referenced in Part 1, other than the fact that they didn't know they were going to get a sequel. But yeah, hey, a new family member. I guess Pluto can't do this all by himself, right? So anyway, the thing with this movie, the story that's commonly told behind it, is Wes Craven made this movie because he was broke and needed a paycheck. He didn't really have any inspiration to make this movie, and he goes out and he starts filming it, and he gets most of the way through when it becomes apparent to everyone involved that this just isn't working. So the film is shelved and never really intended to be released until A Nightmare on Elm Street comes out. Wes Craven is a huge name, and they take this film that he had shot beforehand and said, we're not going to leave a Wes Craven movie on the shelf. So they took a bunch of footage from the first movie, padded out the runtime, and released it in the condition it was. A few things about that. One, Hills Have Eyes Part 2 came so close to being a piece of lost media. Can you imagine with the cult following The Hills Have Eyes had, rumors about a Part 2 just sitting on a shelf somewhere? And it, of course, would have inevitably got lost or destroyed, or the film would have degraded. This, so close to being a lost movie. But they decided to release it anyway. In regards to padding out the runtime with extra footage, this wasn't as egregious as it would be if you tried to do this stuff now. This was well before the days of commonplace household internet, and also home video was relatively in its infancy. You couldn't watch stuff as easily as you can now, so when audiences went to watch Part 2, a little refresher on Part 1, clips that they hadn't seen in a while, it wasn't as bad back then. Now that being said, the clips, like, a lot of people complain about the amount of clips, and it is a significant amount of footage, but that being said, this is no Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. Yeah, there's clips from the first one. It isn't that bad of an amount, and I do think they trimmed him down a little bit so they moved a little faster. It's just a few flashbacks, and I don't think it's that bad. Yeah, it would have been better if we had all new footage, but it's... Go watch Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 if you think this is bad, okay? Anyway, now that being said, after it came out, critics pretty much universally hated it. Wes Craven himself, I believe he disowned this movie, and a lot of people complain about this. I mean, this isn't near as good as the first one. It has weird things like, there's a dirt bike chase scene in a survival movie like this. Beast the dog has a flashback himself, which is one of the few animal flashbacks in movies, and of course Pluto now will run around cackling like hee hee hee. Yeah, there's some dumb, cheesy moments in here, and it's nowhere near the first one. But that being said, I kind of like this one, and I know a lot of people are gonna get mad at me for saying that, and don't get me wrong, the first one is way better. The characters are way better, the meaning is way deeper, and the suspense and build-up and tension in the first one is inarguably way better. But I do think this is a fair bit of good, cheesy fun. This movie, yeah, it's not great, but it's a pretty fun movie. And to understand where this one is coming from, you have to look at the time. The first one, 1977. Now we're in 1985. The horror scene has changed. Slashers are big. And Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is basically Wes Craven's Friday the 13th movie. And personally, I think that's an interesting concept. Wes Craven doing what's essentially a Friday the 13th movie? That's really weird. And it really is a Friday the 13th movie. You have all the teens, they're dumb, they're playing pranks on each other, they're trying to sneak off and sleep with each other, they're constantly going, there's nothing out there, and we even have a score from Harry Manfredini in this movie. So yeah, it's a little bizarre, but if you guys like kind of the B-sides of the Friday the 13th movies, this one, definitely much more of a slasher. And I personally always thought, yeah, it's not near as good as the first one, but it's a good bit of cheesy fun, and I think it's worth watching if you like cheesy slasher movies, because even though the first one, it wasn't really a slasher, Hills Have Eyes Part 2 definitely is. So yeah, not as good as the first one, but I think there's a ton of fun to be had with this movie, and if you're not too uptight about that, I think there's a lot to like here. Lots of fun, cheesy moments, and I think it's kind of cool. I do want to, from here, do a bit of a deeper analysis, so I'm going to talk about the plot in a little bit more specifics. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, so I won't be giving away the ending, but I do want to analyze a bit of the setup, because there's a few fun things to say about this movie. First of all, we open up with an opening borrowed pretty directly from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Hills Have Eyes 2 really does wear its influences on his sleeve. And yeah, the first movie would be a good double feature with Chainsaw, but this one references it much more heavily. You get an opening credits talking about it like a true crime story, and you do get a very similar narration reading out the text to you, trying to make you think this is all real. So yeah, a Chainsaw opening, and also the family is going to be much more into arts and crafts made out of bones, so you'll see those sprinkled throughout the movie. But anyway, Bobby is traumatized. He's alive, but he, is trying to process having to blow up his mom's corpse to live, but he's he's traumatized and he's flashing back to the first movie, and you'll see a few of this. And he's telling his therapist, and his therapist says, "You killed them all, you did a good job." Actually, his therapist is kind of like, "Yeah, you killed them," which is a little weird. But they're all dead, don't worry about it. But of course he still is, and it turns out he has a new special fuel that he's made. He's opened up a garage, and he's made this new fuel, and if people buy it, he could become a millionaire. But the only problem is the race that he wants to showcase his fuel at. You have to drive through the desert to get there. The desert where a good chunk of his family was murdered, and his team says, "Hey, I know you don't want to go there." They don't really know what happened, but they know he's afraid of the desert, and they offer to take the fuel for him, get on the bus, and drive it there himself, and they leave Bobby behind. A few things with this. A few real pros, actually. One, thank you, screenwriters, for not just killing Bobby off for no reason. A lot of times in horror movies, if you can only get the original actor back for a little bit, for whatever reason, they go, "Okay, time to kill them," and it really is just an unsatisfying death. Oh, hey, the first person's back, and they're dead. They survived the whole movie just to die here. And the forced killing off of the last movie's main character always sucks, and they don't do it here. They don't do some out-of-nowhere death scene just to kill him off for no reason. They don't do that, and that's a huge pro. Also, Bobby really lucked out. I mean, we as an audience know that the family's still in the desert, right? Bobby is a horror movie protagonist that once he got out of the desert, he goes, "No, I'm not going back there," and now he lives. I mean, that's just something to think about, is Bobby is one of the few that says no, and he doesn't. He doesn't go back in the desert, so he doesn't die, and now he's going to, eventually be really rich off his fuel, and he gets to live a happy life in a mansion with Beast great-grandson or something, And yeah, that's good for you, Bobby. We also meet Ruby. Ruby is well-adjusted into society. She's actually dating Bobby, and it seems like Ruby's either his second in command, or she might be a business partner. I'm not really sure how they're dividing up the business, but she's well-adjusted, and you would never know that she spent most of her life out in the desert. And yeah, happy life for her. I don't know how plausible this is. I don't know how easy reintegration into society would be, but she's coming along really nice, and she's back, but no one knows that she used to be a cannibal. I don't know. It's good to see her back, though, and good that she's happy. And then we also have Beast, the other returning hero. Always great to see Beast again. But this movie, they kind of know, with Beast's character introduction, they know he's the coolest dog ever. We're introduced to him because they need money for their entry fee into the race, and they're getting this money by studying Beast out. He's apparently made a ton of money off being a stud, and when the bus pulls up, they're like, "Oh, don't call him, we'll go get him." But of course they do, and Beast jumps over a vehicle, opens the gate on his own, and just hops into the bus. Yeah, Beast at this point, they're like, "Hey, we know he's cool, we're gonna play it up with this introduction." And hey, it's always great to see Beast back. And that being said though, unfortunately, I guess it's a budgetary thing or something, Beast stays in the bus a lot of this movie. He does eventually get out, he's cool as always, but I guess they couldn't afford an animal wrangler, so a lot of this movie, Beast is stuck on the bus, and that does suck, because he is the coolest character in this whole franchise. But anyway, we get Beast back as well, and the kids go through into the desert, and they're laughing, they're making jokes, and I think Ruby, for whatever reason, like, has 3 different costumes throughout this scene. If you look at her on this bus scene, she changes her clothes twice. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, they're being Friday the 13th characters when they realize, oh man, we got a late start, we're running late, and then one of them realizes, oh man, it's daylight savings time, it's actually a whole hour later than we thought it was. Again, pre-internet days. And by the way, daylight savings time horror movie. How many daylight savings time horror movies are there? Anyway, they're all running late. They take a shortcut, and Ruby knows at this point, she kind of feels that her family's still out there, and she can tell she's tempting fate. And of course, a big rock gashes open the fuel tank. They notice they're losing fuel. They patch it up, but they're on fumes. And they pull into the old mine town. Now, yeah, it's an old mine shaft with some buildings around it. Primarily the buildings around it. I do kind of wish we got more wacky minecart adventures. Mines are always fun. We get a little bit of scenes in the mine tunnels. And yeah, logically, you wouldn't want to go in the mine tunnels if you didn't have to because they're dangerous. But man, I wish we got a minecart scene. Or I think you might see 1 or 2 briefly, but I wish we got Indiana Jones, you know, but no budget for that. Anyway, they're stuck there, and while they're exploring, Ruby sees Pluto, and they fight a little bit, and Pluto also mentions that Reaper is here, and so now there's 2 people for them to fight. Yeah, I don't know, with just 2 people, maybe it would have been better if you put Pluto by himself and tried to make Pluto into a slasher icon. I get, you know, the first one had a whole family, but just a duo this time around, I don't know. It feels like either have it just be Pluto or do a bigger family, but yeah, it's 2 of them, whatever. But then after that, wacky Friday the 13th style antics, people sneaking off, people making dumb jokes, people getting killed, and of course, wacky booby traps, both from the family and the bikers. And overall, silly, goofy fun. Like I said, in the middle of this movie, Pluto hops on one of their bikes and 2 of the guys chase him through the hills on dirt bikes. A goofy dirt bike chase scene, really, Pluto being on a dirt bike with a silly little helmet, that's a silly concept, and the whole shot really does play out kind of goofy, but you have to be on the right frame of mind to watch this, you know? Yeah, in the first movie, that would have been ridiculous. It was serious, it had something to say about American culture, but sitting around on a cheesy movie night, watching Pluto from The Hills Have Eyes get in a dirt bike chase scene, yeah, no, it's not deep, but with the right mindset, this is a good cheesy movie night movie, and yeah, not as good as the first, not as good tension, not as good themes, not as good characters. We do have the Friday the 13th teens, you know, but that being said, cheesy movie night, this is a really fun film, you know, so I feel like this movie gets trashed on all the time, and I definitely do see where that comes from, but I don't think there's no value in it, and I think, again, with the right circumstances, it's pretty fun. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Wes Craven playlist. You can see my review for Hills Have Eyes Part 1, also Scream and Chiller, and a complete physical media collection for Wes Craven. More details if you watch the video. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Wes Craven playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.